Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 237, room 237.
Oh, I got my
Real Blend.
I'm not going to stand up, but I got my room 237 Shining-esque stuff all over my
Well, now I should have made a Shining joke. I didn't even. Let me start that over again. Hold on one second. Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 237 of Real Blend, a podcast that goes out. I have botched this completely.
I'm keeping all of this in.
No, you should. Absolutely, you
absolutely.
should. A podcast that goes down smooth with an ice cold glass of Jared Leto's hard kombucha is what I had. But I should have made a Shining joke. Dang it. I messed that one up. I'm Sean O'Connell, managing editor at Cinema Blend, and the mediocre co-host of this outstanding podcast on this week's show. We're doing a tier list because you all like tier lists, and we're covering the DC universe with some caveats, which we will explain. We have reviews of Slumberland, which is coming to Netflix, and we're going to mention a couple other titles that are opening in theaters this week. And then we're going to discuss She Said as well, too, which is the Harvey Weinstein investigative piece that's going to be coming out in limited theaters. Is going limited? Is that the case? Rolling out slowly? Do we know?
I think it's
Anybody?
wide. I think it's wide. Yeah.
Oh, is it wide?
So.
Okay,
Yeah.
Good to hear. Those voices that you hear are Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hello, Kev. How are you, sir?
Jonathan, Jacob, Gabriel. Good to see you guys.
Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago, sporting his Fox gear. Hey, Jakey, how are you?
My friend, how are you?
I'm good. I met a guy today who interviewed me for a segment on a show here, and he's from Madison, Wisconsin, but then he said he was in Chicago for a while. And I mentioned that I knew you, and then he kind of clammed up. So I don't know if he knew you or didn't know you or wasn't really in Chicago. Like, it was a really strange, like, the natural progression of that conversation should have been like, oh, I was at so-and-so station, right? Wouldn't you assume?
He was in television, like local television?
Yeah, because he's like in local TV here now. But I don't know. That was weird the way it all went down. I know. Maybe he is envious of you and all your Emmys, your Emmy nominations and wins.
All three of them.
That's what I'm leading to.
I mean, yeah, a lot.
And that's Gabe Kovach, the producer of the show. Hello,
Hi,
Gabe.
folks.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good to see you guys.
Glad to be here.
237 episodes. That's unbelievable.
We gotta slow down.
Yeah, I know. If you guys are watching us on YouTube, hello, thank you for joining us. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Join us back here every single Friday morning when we drop a new episode. Go to youtube.com/RealBlend podcast if you are listening in an audio format and want to see what the four of us look like. Of course, we're available all the different places where you get your podcast needs met. On Mondays, we have a premium that drops. So you can go to the description here where you're listening and find out how to sign up for premium. We play a lot of really fun games over on the premium side. Do you know what we're doing this week for the premium, Gabriel?
It depends. Not yet. We're recording tomorrow, so I don't want to tease something that doesn't happen, but
you have a little bit of time.
It'll be fun.
But it usually gets really competitive. Those tend to be really fun episodes you guys want to listen to. In addition to the premium, you get a newsletter and of course an ad-free version of the show. Like I said, there's a ton of stuff that we're getting into this week, but we want to start right off the bat with the DC Universe tier list. Oh yes, Jacob.
Just thinking about like premium really quickly, and what sometimes the listeners who pay for it get that maybe the people that just listen to the regular episodes do not.
I don't know where this is going.
Well, no, I don't think it's a bad thing. Do the people who listen to the regular episodes know the character of the Kid?
No,
I don't know that they do.
Is that a premium exclusive character on the? There's a fifth character on the show named the Kid, and you gotta to meet him. And you don't meet him often because he doesn't win very often. But when he does win,
please create a keyed Twitter, please, somebody out there, so that we can like a real blend out of context.
Yeah, if there were a real blend trailer, it would be the four of us, and then go and the key.
The trailer gets verified instantly.
For $8, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
You're set.
I would love how about a movie poster? Can somebody do us a movie poster for the Key?
Look, we just got a free movie poster of us carrying your dead body across the beach. We can't keep asking for movie posters.
Incredible.
It's just homework. It's weekly homework.
Oh, also, can we give a shout out to Kevin? What was the young man's name who took our photo at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles?
So his name was Pablo. Jake and I were at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures for the premiere of
phenomenal
Knives
if
Out.
you've never been.
Yeah, and we actually just got back. So we went to the premiere. It was incredible. Jake and I got to walk around the museum a bit, and the thing that we were obviously most excited to see was Bruce the Shark, which is hanging from the ceiling. And it's the actual, or it's I'm assuming they obviously fixed it up, but it's the actual shark that was used in the film, the animatronic shark. And so we were sitting there, myself, Chris Van Vliet, a great friend of ours who's been on the show before, and Jake. And we asked this gentleman for a picture, and he's like, "Oh, no problem at all." And he goes, "Oh, I listened to your podcast." And then, like, you know, we're already like, "Oh, that's amazing." And then he goes, "Where's Sean and Gabe?" Like it was very like surreal. We're in Los Angeles, which is a market that Jake and I, neither of us work in. And somebody just happened to listen to our show, and the person
who we handed our phone to just so happened to be a fan of the show.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
I didn't get his last name, but his first name was Pablo. And if you're listening, please tweet us the photo to Real Blend, because I think we ended up taking a picture with him that he took,
nice.
that he has. So
tweet
if you're
us.
Listening, definitely tweet it
or
to us.
Or email us if you don't have Twitter. Some people have never had Twitter. Some people are running from that platform, which I totally get.
I was going to say, I'm slowly about to join the latter part of that
Feel free
group.
to email it to us if you don't.
Pablo, that email address is realblend@cinemablend.com. And thank you so much for listening to the show. That's amazing. That is so cool when you bump into anybody in the wild. It's almost like that Game of Thrones guy who was yelling at me through the glass in Chicago.
So and I thought we were about to get in a West Side Story fight on the streets of Chicago. I was ready to put up fisticuffs, man.
Four of the toughest guys I know.
I was going to say the four of us in a fight is definitely us dancing at somebody.
When you think of me, you think of someone you want to fight for you for
sure.
Oh
Yeah, it's gonna be a rumble going down.
You're real blend all the way.
Please keep going, please. That's amazing. All right, DC Universe tier list. Gabe, take it away. Describe how we're gonna do this.
If you're new to the DC Universe, as it's now called, it's an absolute mess. It's been an absolute mess pretty much since it started. So today's gonna have some stipulations, some caveats, some explanations, and some weirdness as we navigate the terrain that is DC's making movies the last decade or so. If it's your first time joining us for a tier list, we are going to aggregate our score, so each of us will get a chance to grade each film that we go across, and we will take an average of that, and that is what will construct our tier list. We've done Marvel, we did Tarantino. It's a lot of fun. But we are going to include in this, the DCEU doesn't exist anymore. They call it the DC Universe as a part of DC Films, as a part of whatever. But we are going to include today the Batman and Joker, which is weird because they're not technically DCEU, but we're kind of looking at it as Man of Steel and then sort of whatever the mess that DC's given us since then. And so that's what we're going to do today.
Oh,
is that fun?
I'm ready.
Yeah, and for anybody wondering why, like that, and Gabe just explained it, like there's the Nolan films because that was pre Man of Steel, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know Dark Knight would be the S, but yeah.
Right.
Can we also say that Batman Begins is an S?
We are not doing that tier list.
I think it's an A.
Do
you think it's an A? All right.
I think Batman Begins is an A.
Well, did we do Nolan?
Did we do Nolan? I don't think we've done Nolan because we're all still friends, and I feel like that's
we have not done Nolan. That's right. True. Kevin always says he's not going to come to work that day.
We'll do Nolan. We'll definitely. Well, I say definitely.
We'll do it for Oppenheimer.
We should do it probably the week before Oppenheimer. I try to do these a week before.
Yeah.
So are we going to do Cameron? We got to do Cameron.
Oh, I'm in the middle of a Cameron rewatch right now.
No promises.
It's entirely doable because I mean, in terms of like the films that he's directed. Yes. I mean, if you guys get going on it, you can.
I've seen them all. I'm good.
All I'll say as far as not making a promise, is that I don't know if you looked at our schedule, but we are absolutely jam packed through the end of the year.
We have a lot of stuff coming up.
So
this is true.
It depends.
Make it work, Gabe.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just say no to Damien
Produce
coming on the show.
We'll cut Spielberg.
Damien. Yeah, we'll cut Spielberg.
Okay, moving forward, that's the reason Spielberg's not on the show.
Yeah, exactly. We said no.
We will accept no more questions.
All right, let's get down with the DC Universe tier list, starting with Man of Steel. I mean, I'll just offer up that I think this is an S, but
I think it's 100%. Yeah, I think we're starting out with an S.
I wish we were able to edit in clips on the show. Like we could cut in that clip of Henry Cavill saying it's not an S when he's talking about the.
That's funny.
I'm capable of doing that, but I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But this is the S for sure. And I also, for multiple reasons, I also feel like, let alone Zimmer's score, which I think is one of the greatest scores ever set to action. One of the things I love about what Snyder did with Man of Steel was he wanted to make the flying scenes hard to capture. And that's why a lot of it looks so docu-style, where the camera's almost trying to find Superman in the frame, because if someone's flying that fast, like to have a shot that just easily captures them, he makes it such an immersive experience. I also want to shout out Russell Crowe. That whole opening sequence is incredible. That whole through line, that is just, I love that film. I never understood why that was critically divided. I just never got it. So yeah, I agree 100% S. And I think Cavill's the best Superman ever.
Well, it's divided because of the neck snap, which I think is something that we can't overlook. Like that was a huge
that's what
swing.
makes it an S.
That was a great moment because
to me, that's what makes it an S.
Right. It's the only way. And for people who are listening that don't know what Sean's referring to, like when Cavill or Superman kills General Zod, I mean, he doesn't kill theoretically, right? But in this particular instance, he saved a family, and it was honestly, that was the only way you could actually take that step. What else are you going to do? Have him kill the family?
I hate these hard and fast rules where people decide that these characters are black and white and they either do a thing or don't do a thing, and that no one's ever able to experiment with them at all. Like, I know we had an entire generation of a Superman who would never do such a thing. But to me, like, what makes characters interesting, what makes film interesting and story interesting and Man of Steel interesting is what if he did? What if he did do that thing, and what kind of impact would it have on him? I mean, that scream. When he screams when he does it, like that's to me, like I don't think that it's not fair that like people, like a group of people, these gatekeepers should decide that these are the things the character is allowed to do and these are the things it's not allowed to do, and for the rest of history you have to abide by those rules. At that point, it's just like, well, then why keep making movies if they're going to be the same carbon copy of the same variation? To
me, that death has always been the origin of why he doesn't kill. Like he had to kill Zod.
Fair.
The pain of taking a life.
Actually pointed it out even more. Yeah.
The pain of him having to kill the first thing that he ever had that tied him to his real home. All of that pain to me is the origin of how you create someone who is the hopeful image that they want Superman to be.
I want to clarify one quick thing real fast. So I've looked at some of the comments sometimes when we post these tier lists, and people think like when we put a movie at S that we're saying it's like Godfather or like Apocalypse Now. Like
these are all relative.
This is all relative to this. So I always want to make sure people understand that, because we're not saying Man of Steel is one of the greatest movies of all time. We're just saying within the DC, it is the S tier of what we're referring to. Because I feel like people get confused sometimes. They're like, how could that movie be an S? I'm like, it's an S within what we're talking about. So
also,
just want to clarify that.
It's also just for fun.
Yeah, I know. But people like genuinely look at it and go, wait a second, you're saying Man of Steel, Citizen Kane level? I'm like, no. I
have no time for that. Sean, the three of us said S, which unless you say it's an F, firmly plants it in S. Do you think it's an A or do you think it's an S?
I think it's an A. The tornado scene is still in the movie.
That scene's amazing. What are you talking about?
I think that's, to me, we've talked about this before. I think that scene works in the context of the movie. But say your piece. Say your piece.
I did. The tornado scene doesn't work for me. There is a fundamental line in that movie that I still can't ever cross, which is when he asks Jonathan whether he should have let those people die, because Jonathan's so concerned about, and I understand completely, Jonathan's concern about Superman potentially revealing his powers too early and that the world might not be ready for him. But when he says maybe that you should have, to me, that just goes so against everything that's rooted in the Kents. And like they're supposed to be, and again, yes, you can tweak it a little bit if you want to, but he's supposed to be the moral compass that Clark relies on for the rest of his life.
But he still is. It's just a different moral compass. His moral compass, the tone and the style that Zack Snyder was setting out to make and that he does in Man of Steel is that the answer at the time is maybe. maybe that's the better call. It's supposed to be a little bit more gray.
And I think that's, I think that's why I love Man of Steel is that, it really does address the idea of what would, look at our world over the last just 10 years and how we can't agree on anything. It doesn't matter what it is. If someone like Superman came to this earth, came to America, the division that it would cost, or that it would cause, the amount of political and emotional and religious turmoil that would be thrown up into the air because of this man's just mere existence, which is why, to Gabe's credit, you're absolutely right. The entire movie is about the fact that he exists in a gray area. Like the America that is represented in the Christopher Reeve films does not make sense with the existence of a Superman in the world. Like the world would be unimaginably divided and would tear itself apart if we found out a Superman existed.
Which is why that scene is so great. Because it straddles that
because he knows that
question.
Because Pa Kent knows the world that he lives in.
He's not ready for it. Yeah.
To me, it's a bridge too far. But for you guys, it's okay. Too far.
Also, Sean, you're more versed in the comics than I am. So in terms of my Man of Steel experience, like Jake was saying earlier, I'm not locked into these exact guidelines of what is supposed to be and what's not meant to be. To me, that moment in particular, which is one of my favorite scenes in the film, when you're talking about when they're in the barn, right after the whole bus incident. That's one of my favorite scenes in the film, because I felt like when he said that, I was like, I had never actually thought about it from that perspective, like what Jake was just saying about what the world would try to do if Superman existed. That's how the whole military aspect of it. I mean, it is an interesting thing to think about. I thought they played with that perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. I'm okay with that idea being introduced 100%. I'm totally fine with somebody suggesting to Superman that, yes, it's possible that you have to let people die in order to protect your ultimate secret. Sure. I have a problem that Jonathan Kent is the one telling him that. That's the only thing that bothers me. I'll never really be able to get over that.
Yeah.
Because to me, Jonathan Kent is supposed to be, yes, in that context, but in my opinion, Jonathan Kent is supposed to be the pure innocence that eventually fuels Superman to become that big blue Boy Scout. So I'm fine with tweaking the mythology.
Doesn't that come back into play though with the tornado scene essentially? Because that arc from that scene to the tornado scene, that's that arc right there. Is the arc of him, that moment in the barn is why the tornado scene is so impactful.
Sure, where he again says
it's him playing through that.
And I guess that's exactly why I hate the tornado scene too, right?
That's kind of interesting. No, it's not worth saving me.
Yeah,
you'll out yourself. Yeah,
but again, I don't think your criticism is at all invalid, and a lot of people share that, and a lot of that is rooted in expectation. Like your attachment to the characters sets the expectation of what you want them to be. Exactly. And I don't think that you have ever. You don't like those, but I don't think you've ever said they're completely, unjustified, changes necessarily. It's just different.
In the world, it's fine. Yeah. It's not, those changes rub me the wrong way in ways that I can't get.
And a lot of people feel that way. I think a lot of people feel that way. Yeah, and maybe that's specifically about that, film. But, as we go through these, I always took issue with people who were like, oh, he has to just be hopeful. And it's like, well, what if he learned to be hopeful? What if he became, what if we saw him become the hopeful image? Why does he have to just be a cartoon? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll put it the S. 3 versus 1 will definitely put it in the S, which I'm sure you're not totally upset about, Sean, but I get the...
No. It's okay. I would have said A, so
yeah,
I'm not devastated.
This brings us to our first kind of wonky one, but it's pretty straightforward. We're going to do BVS, Dawn of Justice. We're going to do the Ultimate Edition. We're not going to do the theatrical.
I have to say A. I'll say A for BVS. If Man of Steel is going to be an S, I got to put BVS at an A.
Well, again,
a lot of letters.
Again, you gotta. It's wherever you feel. Not necessarily relative to what we've already done. True.
Yeah. Yes,
because we're gonna average.
I will even say, I'll say that I think BVS Ultimate is the best version of that story.
Yeah,
it fills in a lot of the narrative cracks that were missing from the theatrical cut. It has several amazing scenes throughout it. But there's no getting around the fact that the Doomsday sequences are, Zack CGI carnage to the extreme. Sure. And anytime on a rewatch, I still watch the back half of it, but that last 20 minutes or so, I sort of tune out a little bit.
To Jake's point, we were prepping the show and kind of going through like how we wanted to cover this before we got into it. I'm with him, and like I can't really even tell you the difference between this one and the theatrical version. Like I don't remember the theatrical version at all. Like that's the thing. I think A sounds right to me. I would say B plus A minus range, but I would probably give it the dip into A just because the highs are that high. Kev, where do you put it?
I'm in an A because, well, first of all, like, again, with like Man of Steel, these films have been heavily divisive, and I've always found myself defending them, not to you guys, obviously, but to like, and for me, BVS, well, first of all, I mean, Ben Affleck's my favorite Batman ever. So, and I know
He's
that's
amazing.
That's going to rub people the wrong way. I get it.
He's great.
I just thought he was an amazing Batman. And I remember seeing the teaser for that movie with the, Tell Me, Do You Bleed? And I was like, that is badass. Also, that movie has the warehouse fight is one of my favorite superhero sequences ever. Like the way that scene was done. Also in this particular cut, for people out there listening who haven't maybe watched the R-rated cut versus the theatrical, it's rated R and it's violent and there's blood. And like that particular scene in particular, there's that one death where he breaks that dude's neck when he like puts him down into the box. But all outside of that, I mean, I also found the IMAX footage to be extraordinary. The nightmare scene is outstanding. The Batmobile chase sequence is unbelievable. Wonder Woman's entrance is incredible. And I just feel like, that movie, that for people wondering like the difference, I think the reason why this version is better is because they flesh out Eisenberg's story a lot more. I think one of the problems with the theatrical was the whole bullet story, and I thought Eisenberg's performance almost came off goofier in the theatrical than this cut, because they actually gave it time to breathe. When I watched this cut, I'm like, oh my God, Eisenberg's actually really good in this. There are things in this film, of course, that don't work. I also think the Batman Superman fight is amazing. That's all in IMAX, and and the music and the score and Junkie XL, and then bringing back Zimmer's stuff. I mean, it is. I really enjoyed this movie, and to me, to this
Gal
day,
Gadot being introduced, Gadot's introduction as Wonder Woman is fantastic.
Okay, but see, I want to jump in on that point, because I would call this an A. I think the highs of this film are worthy to hold it up there. But my biggest issue with this film is that it is a nearly 3-hour long game of catch up, where like you could tell Warner Brothers is so badly trying to replicate what Marvel was doing at the time, that they were just I mean, like, I got to be honest with you. I don't think Wonder Woman should have been introduced in this. Like, should have just been. I mean, you were just now introduced. We just met the new Batman. Like, let him breathe.
The MCU did this with Spider-Man and Black Panther. They were both introduced in someone else's film.
But by that point, they were already like we had Iron Man and then Captain America and then Thor. Like we're at the beginning. This was at the beginning of what was supposed to be the DCEU, and it felt like they were trying. So they were rushing so much to hurry up and get to their big Justice League movie.
Well, not
didn't
only
have time to let anything breathe.
Not only were they rushing it, but they were already, when Man of Steel was released, they were already trying to balance Zack Snyder's vision with half of the audience not agreeing with it. Like that was already happening with the release of Man of Steel. So it was just
So I do think I do think it's a little like the sequence where they're like really quickly introducing the Flash and Aquaman and like, yes, Wonder Woman's entrance is great, but I think that they could have, honestly, I would have loved to have seen her solo movie before seeing their introduction. I just needed each. Yeah, that's great. That could have been the case for, like, we could have gotten that in the Wonder Woman movie, or we could have gotten that like whenever, I just think that these two characters needed to be able to exist. I mean, hell, like the DCEU Batman didn't even get his own film before he was introduced into the story. Like to me, it's just a reminder that Warner Brothers so badly wanted what the MCU had that they were just willing to go like, oh, all these guys. Okay, really quick. Like, here's everyone you need to know. Justice League comes out next year.
In hindsight, the only defense that I would give Warner Brothers at the time, and I don't think they were looking this far ahead. I think you're right. I think they were just like, we want to be where they're at right away. But if you think about it, if they had played it slow and we're watching Infinity War and Endgame and we're finally getting like BVS, like think about the way that we talk about Marvel movies around there. We're like, well, it's not Endgame. Well, it's not, like, oh, they set such a high bar. I could imagine. Again, I don't think that they were probably
but then,
this clever, but you could imagine that we're watching an Avengers or we're watching this, that, and the other, the giant films in Marvel, and they're like, well, we have a solo origin story. You know, like I could see where narratively that would be tough to compete on the big screen.
I feel like the success of Joker teaches us, though, that like audiences just want a good movie with a good story. Like that's at the end of the day, like we don't care if how much it's connected or, you know, to that point, like that's almost becoming a fault of the MCU is that everything's a trailer for the next thing. Like just give us a good movie, and then if all of those good movies in 5 or 6 years are somehow able to connect, fantastic. But like just worry about the product that you're putting in front of us at hand, and then we'll worry about what can happen with that product down the road.
We slide that right into A.
Little hot take, and I'm sure this is going to make some people angry. I think the Martha thing is brilliant. And I think
I actually really like the Martha thing too. I really like that. You're going to find, I think, a bunch of Martha apologists on this podcast.
But here's my thought. Here's my thing on that real fast, because I know we're going to move on. But like,
go ahead.
People were really up in arms about that. And listen, you can call me ignorant for saying this. I had no idea that both their moms were named Martha.
I never made the connection.
Never knew that.
Never made the connection.
So when that happened, I was like,
well, Martha Wayne always dies in the first 5 minutes of every movie, so you don't really think of her that much.
I just thought that I will never understand, especially with these movies, Man of Steel and BVS. I just always found it like really combative with people, and like that particular line, like that was made fun of like an SNL sketch. And I think it was a beautiful moment, man. So smart. Well,
because the whole movie, he's looking at him as this alien threat.
Right.
And in that moment, he realizes like just how human he is. He has a human mother. He has a human mother named Martha.
Like, I'm sorry. That's so good.
It's so great writing. I mean, I would love to have been there when they came to that conclusion, because I bet you people didn't even know that I mean, if you read the comics, we all know Martha. I mean, we all know Martha in terms of Superman, Martha and
dude, I read them and I had no idea.
And then to set it up that way to where Martha's in danger. So what he's saying is save Martha, and it's hitting him. And the reason he dresses up like an idiot and fights people at night is because he was a kid and couldn't save his mother. Like that's powerful stuff, man.
It is.
That's leaning into the origin, these decades long origin of these characters in a great way.
I want to throw something out there that's going to blow Kevin's mind. I don't know if it's true. I do want to do some research and see if this is the case.
Okay.
But I was at a place recently where I was able to discuss some of Zach's movies with some of the people who know Zach. Let's just put it that way, right?
Sure.
Okay. I know where you were.
And
you're in those Illuminati meetings now?
I heard for the first time that the warehouse scene was directed by second unit director.
Wow. Really? Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, because
a director one of the greatest going off of his storyboards, though.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, obviously Snyder would be heavily involved. Yeah, but like the best, I mean, arguably one of the best scenes in Infinity War, which is Thor's entrance into Wakanda, was directed by second unit. Sam Hargrave directed that scene, who did Extraction. The Russo brothers didn't direct that scene. Yep. So it happens very often. But I mean, I have a hard time believing that Snyder wasn't there for that.
We were kicking around like people who could step in for a Man of Steel sequel if he didn't do it. And this person I was speaking to, they were like, oh, well, fill in the blank could do it because he's been shooting second unit for Zach forever. He did the warehouse scene. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What?
I wonder how 100% that is. I would imagine.
I don't know.
I think people forget though. People forget directors. Directors aren't craftspeople. They're not. Directors are tastemakers. Directors are just saying yes and
Unless
no.
You're Nolan.
Yeah. But no, but I mean, but even
a crafts guy.
But no, I'm saying even to that point, he is saying this is what it should be, and he's giving it to an artist to make it so.
Yeah. Doesn't Tarantino not have a second unit? Doesn't he not use it?
I'm sure he does.
Yeah, but like, what would he use second unit for?
Well, like I remember there was a scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when they turned the Taco Bell lights on, and it's like a 3-second shot in the film. It took them like 3 or 4 days to shoot it, and he was there for all of it. Like that's pretty remarkable. I mean, and for people listening, second unit is obviously a very common thing in filmmaking. I just have a hard time believing that Snyder wouldn't have been there to direct at least some of that scene.
My guess would be that he was seeing everything, giving notes on everything. Like it's an important scene.
Sure. Like it's a big scene.
I'm sure.
say
I would love to
also-
know what is the most like famous or prominent or iconic scene in movie history that was directed by a second unit.
It's got to be.
That's
Well, one of them has to be
cool.
Infinity War.
I'm sure that there are a ton
big
of
I would say I think there are
notable-
probably more classic ones than we think.
Lord of the Rings probably has a ton because you know, like
Oh,
'cause
sure.
what was it? Didn't
Yeah.
Circus shoot a lot of second unit, or was that on the
Yes,
Hobbit?
he did. Yeah, no, I think he did on Lord of the Rings
on
too.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Forget if it was Lord of the
I
Rings
thought
or
he
just
did.
the Hobbit that he came through.
It might
and
have been
did
the
second
Hobbit. I
unit.
think he.
I feel like I would say the Hobbit feels
Was it
more
Hobbit?
right.
more in line
Circus
with
was
when
starting
he
to get a
started
little
directing.
more into directing. Yeah.
Either
Okay.
way, before we can knock out one more before we need to take a quick break. And I think that this one will be rather quick. I don't even know how low I'm gonna put it. That's my only thing.
Yeah.
Suicide Squad.
I'm gonna say F.
D.
I'm not gonna go F. I'll go D because I
feel
think
D
I think the
too.
beginning is good. I like the beginning a lot.
And you feel the potential of it, which
Yes.
maybe that's being
Third
generous.
act is awful.
You feel
I'll
the
say this
potential.
too. I'm giving it credit for its casting. I think it
Yeah.
nailed a couple of really good casting decisions.
Margot's amazing in that movie,
Yeah,
and so
Margot's
is Jared Leto. I
great.
wish there was
Great.
more Jared. Yeah, I mean, it's a D.
Will Smith's good as Deadshot.
He is.
Will
It's
Smith
not
is good. Well, and
Probably a C minus.
Joel Kinnaman. What's his character's name?
Rick Flag.
Rick Flag.
Flag.
He's great. I like that character. You need that
The
guy.
opening of that film is
Yeah.
good.
He has one of the worst like line deliveries in the movie when he's like, but
I guess I'm more thinking of him like through the Suicide Squad. I guess maybe I'm more just thinking that.
which we'll
character.
get to
not a-
later.
Yeah,
Good movie. It's just
not
I
a
don't
good
think
movie.
it's I don't think it's an F though.
Terrible film.
it's bad.
It
It's bad.
angered me when I saw it in theaters. Like, oh my god, I was angry.
I'll give
One
it
of
a
the greatest
D.
trailers of all time though.
Yes.
I'll give it a D just because Margot Robbie was cast as Harley Quinn and she's been fantastic in everything as
good in
Harley
it.
Quinn.
Amazing.
She is.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
great.
she's
She's
great.
great in it.
Viola Davis is good in that movie too.
Sure.
I mean,
Someone
like-
pointed out to me that the first 30 minutes of that movie are introduction scenes for the characters that you just keep meeting them over and over again.
Yeah.
Like Will Smith gets like 3 dossiers broken down about him. They just keep introducing them. For God's sakes, put them on a mission.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, we are going to take a quick break and we'll be back to rush through the rest of these. We have so many more.
We
of these
got some
to do.
good ones.
We got some good ones. We got some good ones, but maybe we'll pick up the pace. We've explained the history of the DC universe.
Yeah.
And we'll dive back in when we get right back. And we are back, and we're gonna pick things right back up with Wonder Woman. Who wants to take Wonder Woman first?
I think that's a really solid A. I think the final act gets a little, like we were talking with Batman versus Superman, it gets a little bit CGI.
No Man's
fest.
Land's great.
No Man's Land is one of the
Yeah.
best sequences of
Yeah.
any film we're going to cover today. But I think that the final act is what, for me, keeps it from crossing that threshold into S territory.
Yeah, and we're still in that territory where like the DC films were being shot on film, which I always loved that because there's a look to the first few of these, the Man of Steel, the BVS, and Wonder Woman that shooting on 35 and beyond. It just gave them a different look, a darker look, a more cinematic look. Also, like one of my favorite things about this film, I know the No Man's Land scene is the big one to talk about, but there's a scene with Chris Pine and Gal Gadot. Obviously, they're on a boat and they're going to London. I think it was in the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And
From Themyscira.
I just love that sequence. I just love their conversation in that scene. I also felt that it was really cool to have this concept of him teaching her about the world and what she hadn't known about what was going on. Like there was a lot to that film outside of the obvious action sequences that I thought was just really good writing, good sequences, good performances. And obviously with her introduction in BVS, she's a perfect Wonder Woman, an incredible Wonder Woman. And even just like, I don't know, I just really think that Patty Jenkins did such a brilliant job, capturing that innocence of the character, but also the idea of the strength and what she was going to be able to do to help the world. And I think that there was this juxtaposition of like this like fish out of water element, and then this person who was actually going to be there to save the day kind of thing. And I think even though the third act has that CG stuff that I'm not really huge into, but
It's
even
just
the
a
emotional
rote
stuff.
superhero ending. Yeah, which is a bummer.
But I mean, but his like the flying, that when he flies up, and I was invested in that whole storyline.
Right.
I thought they were so good together.
It's another example, and Patty Jenkins didn't cast Gal, but she did cast Chris Pine, and that's another.
Was it Gal Gadot?
Gal Gadot. Yeah, Gadot, I think is correct.
I always get confused on that one. Yeah,
she's great, and that's great casting, and also he is perfect casting, and the balance that they needed to have, the chemistry they needed to have, tonally the shifts that they needed to have between her and him. That's another great example. So we have an A. Sean, did you give a grade?
It's an A. It's huge risk to go back and do a period piece in the middle of this universe that you're building. You know,
don't get a lot of World War One stuff, right? Because that was World War One. We don't really get that a lot in cinema. We see World War II all the time in cinema. This was World War One.
We've been on a run of World War One since
recently.
Then, I think. Since then,
because you haven't put superheroes that much back in that time frame, and so to jump that far back. And I thought it did a great job with Themyscira, which is, a fantasy realm that they had to sort of come up with the idea for. Again, Kevin's right with the casting of, the pairing of her with Chris Pine is terrific. They're so good together. He's great in the fact that he's willing to take a backseat.
Yes, exactly. 100%.
There are a lot of other leading men who would want to be, the guy sort of thing. And he's very content to just be, this is your show. And
you can't cast The Rock as that guy.
In any way.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
He played with like a vulnerability and a humility. I loved like his reactions when she would say something like, "Oh, I'm just gonna matter of factly do this." He goes, "You can't just do that." He's just like, "Why not?" I just love they were so good. That's why I like that boat scene so much, because I found that that to me was the centerpiece of the emotional aspect of that film. I know you look at action scenes in that film, that's what you want to talk about the most, but their relationship, their chemistry to me is why that movie worked.
Yeah, that's a great A.
It's a solid A.
Now we dive into the sticky business of
here we go.
Justice League, or as some affectionately call it, Justice League, as brought to you as mutilated, or however you might characterize it, by Joss Whedon. Justice League.
I think that's an F.
Is that our F?
I just think it's just a disaster of every. It is a butchering of all these great. It's just one of those like. And
the fact that we've seen what it could have been makes it look that much worse. When we're like, that shot was like that.
I went back and genuinely tried before Zack Snyder's Justice League came out. I went back to see, okay, I really want to rewatch this one to just be able to compare the two. So I I hadn't seen it since theaters, and I legit couldn't make it 20 minutes. I was like, I'm not gonna subject myself to this. I just can't. I think it's one of the worst superhero films in recent memory.
It's so bizarre how it cuts back and forth between the reshot footage, in scenes that still have the bones of Zack's,
That's why I can't go to an F, because there is Snyder stuff in there that I think
we can go to an F because it mutilates that footage anyway. It crops it, colorizes it.
There were moments where I was like, "Oh, this is cool," because
that's like if I took like Jaws and like just did all kind of crazy things to it. Well, their Jaws is still in it, and just made like a terrible shark film.
Let me argue this, Kev, and I think I think if the three of us are F, we probably win out anyway. But
that's fine. Yeah,
I would say I don't disagree with what you're saying, but we are going to rank Zack Snyder's Justice League, so he'll get his proper ranking then. I don't think we need to weight this.
That's fine. I just personally, in my opinion, there were moments. So like coming at this film from being a Man of Steel and BVS fan, like even though we know the history of it now, there were still these Snyder moments that I remember geeking out about, like that whole sequence with the Flash, like in slow mo, like when he tips the sword. Like I mean, that stuff was cool, and I remember seeing that going. Cool. Yeah, but then you have to take the mustache scene in the beginning, and then you have to do, there's just bad stuff in the film. But I do, when I first saw it, I honestly didn't know a ton about what happened. So I was like geeked out about some of the Snyder-esque aspects of it. But, looking back on it now, I go, yeah, it clearly doesn't look anywhere near as good as what Zack ended up doing with his cut later on. But not a good movie at all. It's just.
Sean, are you also an F?
It's an F on principle. But there was always an element of Justice League that once I heard it, I couldn't stop thinking about it this way. There are a lot of people who consider it as an entry point for that team and those characters for really young kids. that really young
Kids
kids
love
can
that
sit
movie.
down and enjoy
Yeah.
that film because they don't
Weirdly,
give
kids
a
love that
crap
movie.
about, all the things that nitpick us about it.
They don't know.
And they're not going to sit through the Snyder Cut, the 4-hour Snyder Cut of, so as a gateway for young kids, granted, there's a ton of DC animation that they should probably be going to anyway. But I think that I can't say that it's a movie with no redeeming qualities because at least it does have that going for it. But everything else is a hot mess. So it's got to be. It's got to be enough.
Sean, you'll know this because you wrote a book about it. Did Snyder direct the scene where they get in the car and he goes, "What's your superpower?" And he goes, "I'm rich." I like that moment. Is that
I think
a
that's
Snyder
in
moment?
Snyder Cut. That's in the Snyder Cut.
It's a good line.
It's a great line.
It's a good line.
It's delivered well.
And all that whole scene with him and Barry is pretty good, man. Like in his
apartment.
when he throws. That's a cool scene.
How funny
man.
would it be
It's
if that was a Joss Whedon line, but Zack Snyder, after all of that, he was like, "Oh, I stole that
kept it
from
in.
mine. I stole that from mine.
like
Actually, I
that.
did like that. I did like that."
That's a great line.
But to give you an example, in that scene, there's a sequence where like Barry is explaining like why he hasn't fit in with the rest of the population. And then they add the bit about brunch. Like Ezra Miller's like brunch. What is that? And the haircut difference and the lighting difference is so stark, in the middle of the scene that like when he comes back on, because now he's doing credence for the Fantastic Beasts movies when he goes back to do the reshoots, and he has this bad wig and it's lit for like TV almost, and you're just like, oh yeah, I can't look at that. What happened? What happened with this?
In hindsight, it's pretty terrible. But
Well,
at the time
look
when
at our
you
wide, varied tier right now. I mean, this
speaking
is really
of
interesting.
Terrible. What'd you guys think of Aquaman?
Aquaman's
Pitbull, baby.
a B. Aquaman's
Oh,
a
it's
B.
not.
B?
It's not a B.
I enjoy
B?
Aquaman.
The
I enjoy
Pitbull
Aquaman.
scene alone, it's defaulted to a C at least.
Redheads. Oh, what are you gonna do? Redheads. What
It
is
is
that
not.
movie?
It's funny. It
I think it's
has
a
a
C.
lot of funny elements.
Well, also Aquaman is in the C. Let's give it a C.
I like that.
I think it's a C.
It's a
in
C
that,
for me.
like, yeah, like there's
SEA.
there's nothing so unbelievably horrible about it that it deserves to be in the D or the F.
It's just
And I
perfectly
actually-
mediocre.
Yeah, I
fine.
enjoyed it while watching it when we did the junket in December a couple of years back. I think I was literally sitting right next to Sean. But
you
that being
enjoyed it.
said, I did, but I've also had no urge to ever go back and revisit it. Like I have not seen it since that day, and
He rides a
I
seahorse
wouldn't want to
into
watch
battle
it.
at the end of the
Yeah.
movie.
Oh,
And
dude,
so he
there's
gets a
also
sea horse.
Yeah, man. There is a phenomenal shot in that film. Is it during that scene where it's at night? We're on a
And when
ship,
he
we're
dives down into the.
That was cool.
Yeah,
And like and there's some great gun moments
Nicole
where like the
Kidman's good in
monsters
it.
coming out of the sea, and like there's some cool.
There's cool shit.
But
in
then
it.
you got Pitbull. Then you
It's
got
the
Pitbull.
most
looking at.
James Wan, like that's the most James Wan scene in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
sea monsters.
Isn't there a scene
100%.
where like he gives Mara flowers and then she starts eating them? Does she start eating them? They're in
Yeah.
that
Probably,
town.
man.
They go into that town.
I don't know.
I don't
Probably.
know. Weird. It's very weird.
Filtered
All right, I'm not going to
Aquaman.
argue with C. I think it's a B. I like James Wan, and I think James Wan.
I love James
is one of
Wan.
the few directors that managed to get his stamp onto the
Yeah.
product properly. I think they gave him his vision. He went loose. He cut loose with it. Patrick Wilson has like 7 amazing outfits as that movie goes on.
That's okay.
It's fantastic.
If you're trying to
underwater-
crawl us to a B with his amazing outfits,
The underwater
They're
stuff
incredible.
didn't look good.
Not Anthony Namor.
No, that was great.
Wait till we see Avatar.
All right, we will move on, and we have Shazam, which I think is a delightful entry.
I dug this movie.
I think
do
it's
too.
great.
I think it is a
delightful film.
delightful B. But I don't know if there's like I really enjoyed it, had a lot of fun, but I don't know if there's anything so unbellivably special about it that it deserves to break the B ceiling.
I don't
to A.
know. I don't know. I might
think
put it
it's-
in A in that I think that. Excuse me. I can think of his Twitter handle, Pony Smasher, but I can't think of the gentleman's name.
David
the director.
Sandberg.
David Sandberg.
Real
Thank
blend
you.
guest.
Yes. I think he's a great director, and he has an amazing. If you don't know his origin story as a director, I recommend it. He's a fascinating guy. But I think his approach to this movie was something that we talk about a lot, which was, what if I just made a really enjoyable movie, like a watchable movie that people will watch and they will enjoy. And to me, this I don't think there was anything that I disliked. I thought that Zachary Levi was great.
Okay,
I
that's
thought
fair,
that
but are there a bunch of things about it that you love?
I think it's a solid B.
Because to me, that's the difference between a B and an A. Like, there's a lot of things about, like, I liked just about everything about it, but there's just not that many things that I loved about it, which to me makes it hard to justify.
I loved the movie overall. I enjoyed the experience, but now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it's probably like a solid B plus. Yeah, I mean, it's not far off from.
I love Zachary Levi in the role because
he's great.
Because
Mark Strong's a good villain.
Playing a kid. He's playing a kid in those shoes, and I think he does that really well and super engaging.
And who's the actor? Jack Dylan Grazer. He's great in it too.
He's great in it.
I love. It reminds me of a great like Amblin movie, like an '80s Amblin.
Yes, I love the story of his mother, and that he finds out that his mother just didn't want him. And I think that is an incredibly powerful scene that is not a thing that we get in the DCEU. I think it's an incredibly human scene, and it makes me love the ending of the movie even better whenever we get introduced to the family, which I'm excited to see more of. The foster family is good.
The foster family is a good element too.
It is. I really
do
solid
like
film.
That.
Yeah,
it's good.
For me, it's an A because I find it delightful.
I'm going B, if only because it's like DC didn't have, or Warner Brothers didn't have a ton of faith in it, so they didn't give it a budget.
Sure.
When you go back to try to rewatch the tentpole moments of it, they feel cheap. The bus scene looked
cool, I thought.
I will say one of my favorite superhero moments ever is the moment where Mark Strong, they're up in the air flying, and Mark Strong is giving this huge epic villain speech, but he's so far away that he just goes like, what? Why? Because it makes you realize, oh my God, they would not be able to hear each other.
That is a very funny joke.
That's a great bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny joke.
Good stuff. Okay, I will add this in post. You boys will not see this, but the folks at home will see. Joker. I don't have the logo in this because we decided to add that last minute. But where do we put
A?
Joker.
I think to me, Joker's an S.
Joker's
is just a masterpiece. I think Joker is a masterpiece. I rewatched it recently. I just think
on my rewatch,
the screenplay, the direction, his performance.
On my rewatch, it dropped to an A.
Oh, I still think it's an S.
Yeah.
So here's where we're split.
2 A's, 2 S's.
I think we've said in the past that in order for it to be an S, it has to be a firm S.
I get significant chills when he goes to visit little Bruce Wayne.
Oh yeah, it's a very good movie. Yeah,
the amount of history, that's in those characters.
Yeah,
and the concept of the origin is really fascinating. Of this guy who has this disorder, that is struggling to get by. And it feels to me like a movie that shouldn't work. Like on paper, it sounds too goofy to be like, let's do a Joker story that's kind of like the King of Comedy, and Taxi Driver.
Exactly like those two things.
Yeah.
It is. Yes. I think it's a solid
I would make an
A.
S movie too if I just took Scorsese's movies and made them over. I'd probably make an S movie as well. My bad. I totally misunderstand. You guys wanted it an S for Scorsese. I see. I see.
Is that wrong?
And so what do we do here?
You're absolutely because no other film on these lists rips off from any other film that's ever been made.
But Joker is probably the most similar to a classic film.
But like Joker has the blessing of Scorsese and even De Niro. Like I kid.
It's really good.
It knows what it's doing.
Remember when Joaquin Phoenix had fun on our show? Come on.
The best.
Dare I say.
The best. So not because I said an A. I believe in the past we've said before that an S has to be really special and that we have to have like a firm majority.
We've got like 18 MCU S's.
That's not my problem. I
promise you a majority of those I didn't pick.
I think this means
it's for Joker.
It's an A. I think we usually err on positivity. I know this, that when we're split, we usually go for the higher one. Because we're just having fun and we don't like to be negative anyway if we don't have to be. Okay. So I think I'm going to put it in A. I'm sorry, boys.
Fine. All right.
Sorry, let's let the listeners chime in on this too. Comment below.
Oh, that's a terrible idea.
No. I would like to know if
that's one of the worst things you've ever said on this show, Kevin.
Well, no, I mean, I am genuinely curious if people would consider that an S or an A.
Oh, I not just on that. I mean, answer that specifically, but I always encourage people to send me your tier list.
Oh, don't worry. The tier list ones get comments.
Tiermaker.com. Make your list.
I am curious if people are going to fall on that one.
Insert one of our names is an idiot.
Well, I have a burner account for each of us that I comment that. I comment that every time. All
Can't spell Todd Phillips without an S. That's all I'm pointing out.
Okay, that's a stretch. Birds of Prey. I think a really good C. I thought it was a really good film. I thought this was a solid B.
Yeah, I think it's a really solid B.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
B minus for me.
Who said C?
C. I said C.
Really?
It's one of those ones that I enjoyed it while I watched it, but I have no desire to ever go back and rewatch it.
I would. What Jake said about
Perfectly
Shazam
fine.
of like, is there anything that you absolutely love about it? When we're talking about Shazam, I feel that way about this. There's nothing that I think that I love about it, other than
Except for the
again,
bacon, egg, and cheese.
yeah, it's a funny scene. But other than, of course, Margot Robbie is still giving us an amazing performance. That's
And Kathy Yan did a really good job with that. I mean, the action in that
Real
film
Blind
was
Guest.
really good. I mean,
Real Yes.
I think it's a solid B. I really do.
Yeah,
I mean, I
thanks,
thought it
B.
was fun.
She was a real blind guest and a really awesome interview. I do recommend going back and
What was she
checking
on
that
for?
out. For
Birds of Prey, wasn't she?
No, it wasn't for Birds of Prey. It
No.
was for the film that they released after Birds of Prey, right? She had already made like an independent film.
Oh, that's right.
and
You're
then
right.
it got
Good call.
held up while she was making Birds of Prey, and I cannot remember.
She was great on the
Say
show.
it for me real quick. Let me find it.
That was a good guest. She was a really good guest. I remember because
Oh,
we
you know-
talked to her about that, like
Dead
going from the
Pigs.
big
Dead
budget.
Pigs.
Yeah.
Dead
Yes,
Pig,
good
that's
call.
right.
Well done.
That's right.
Good pull.
Yeah,
But
but she talked, I think, about Birds of Prey. I think in that.
She did. Yeah, we did.
You know who's good in this is Ewan McGregor. He's entertaining.
he is.
He's having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's having
it's
a
a
good
good
time.
performance.
The
That
whole
a
cast
good
is
movie.
actually really good.
And yeah, the birds of prey
Mary Elizabeth
themselves,
Winstead.
Mary Elizabeth
Yeah.
Winstead and Rosie Perez.
Rosie
and
Perez.
Yeah,
Perez was great in this.
They're good. All right, this is
Rosie Perez was good.
Actually, the whole
Yeah.
cast. Journey Smollett is really good, and the young girl, who I'm now, Ella J.
Yes.
Basco. The young girl was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, she's good.
That
Hey,
whole
just,
sequence is amazing too, and like the with all like the powdery.
Oh yeah.
Super colorful.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really quick, just some minor breaking news, guys. But just because we were talking about James Wan and Aquaman, it was just announced that James Wan and Jason Blum are merging their horror companies to create one mega supplier of horror movies for Universal, meaning Wan is leaving Warner Brothers behind. And I mean, that seems fairly significant. I mean, those are arguably two of the biggest names in horror, and they're choosing Universal.
Interesting. Because even Malignant, James made at Warner Brothers.
I love
like
Malignant.
they've given him
I didn't mean
carte blanche.
to derail the show, but that just seems like
Atomic Monster.
like a significant
His
story.
company Atomic Monster is joining with
Blumhouse.
So how is that going to work? Is it going to be like a sub label of Blumhouse? Because Blumhouse is definitely the bigger name.
It says creating one mega supplier of horror movies for Universal.
Do they keep it under the Blumhouse umbrella then?
I guess that's more my question is what's it going to be called?
Let them reinvent the Universal monsters, the classic Universal monsters.
This does make a lot of sense because Lee Winnell, another Real Blend guest,
Yes.
him and James Wan started out together. They did the Saw films, and then Lee went over to Universal and worked under Blumhouse with The Invisible Man. Then he signed a huge deal with them. It makes sense why maybe James Wan would jump over there.
Wow, that's wild.
I mean, Universal kind of has horror on lock.
They do.
They do. They have a really. They have a really good.
Well,
I mean, Warner Brothers does too with The Conjuring and stuff like that. I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know.
I mean, also don't forget Paramount put out some of the biggest horror films of the year.
Yeah.
Smile just crossed 200 million.
Yeah.
People actually, we probably should tell people it's streaming on Paramount Plus, I believe now.
Yeah,
That's
today.
crazy.
You can see it. Yeah.
Oh, and so is Tulsa King, which is great.
I dig Tulsa King.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Tulsa
I'm sorry,
King's
Gabe. I
great.
derailed the entire tier list.
Oh, good. We're gonna do a what's his name? Ty Sheridan, not Ty Sheridan. What's his name?
Taylor Sheridan.
Taylor Sheridan.
Taylor
Thank you. I haven't watched Yellowstone, but I love Taylor Sheridan as a storyteller. But I just
I do too.
haven't brought myself to watch.
What's that movie he did with it was in the snow with Renner?
Wind River.
Wind River.
Oh,
Wind River.
So good.
And was that Elizabeth?
That's interesting, but I would
Olsen.
argue, like, out of his
Olsen.
trilogy, that's I think the weakest.
But they're all
'Cause
strong.
I would. Oh yeah, they're all strong.
Yeah.
But if I had to rank them, like as we're doing right now, I would say Sicario is the masterpiece.
But he didn't
Then
direct.
But see, that's I'm always Villeneuve on that one in my head.
Yeah, but he
Sheridan didn't direct
directed
that.
he directed Wind River and he directed Hell or High Water.
Water?
Hell or High Water.
Yeah.
Is that
So
true?
I-
Wait, did Sheridan write Sicario?
Yes, that I
Yes,
think
I
is
did not
correct.
know that. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I knew that. I mean, I always that's always in my head a Villeneuve film, but like But yeah, Gabe's right. Like, because with Hell or High Water and Wind River, he directed.
He did not. He did not direct Hell or High Water.
No. Okay.
No.
What?
No.
Why did he think that?
And he did direct Wind River.
Yeah.
Who directed Hell or High Water?
Oh, maybe that's why it's the weakest.
Wow. I honestly, that's breaking news to me.
David Mackenzie directed.
Oh
Hell or High
wow,
Water.
jeez.
I thought that was a Taylor Sheridan film through and through, writing and directing.
Sorry, David
I
Mackenzie.
will never forget when those guys brought the stolen bank money to the casino and they cashed it in and got chips. And then Chris Pine just sat at the bar and drank and watched a Yankee game and then brought the chips back and got new money. I was like, that is the most ingenious thing. How has no one thought of that before? Wow. You just had the casino clean your money.
Only a $12 million budget for that.
I think
film.
that
whole shootout at the end, insane.
I think he's a terrific writer. And to me, I don't have an issue with it. I could see someone, if they're nitpicking, like his structure is very, through those films, is very apparent. Like it's slow, it feels plodding, like him, and then you get to the end and it's this big, like, anxiety inducing adrenaline rush thing. But I find that to be incredibly entertaining. So I don't mind that at all.
Gabe, you have no idea how good Stallone is in Tulsa King.
Yeah.
He's so good.
It really makes you realize, like, how's he never been cast in a role like that before?
Really? I like the
If you get the chance, not to pimp my own stuff.
Is the Tulsa King, is he like, is it like he's a boxer? He's boxes in Tulsa.
It's his first time playing a boxer. Yeah. First time playing a boxer who just got back from Vietnam.
POW boxer. Poor Sly.
No, that's a good endorsement, because I always love when an actor, especially someone with the tenure like that, gets to give you something fresh. Wonder Woman, 1984.
Man. I feel like I like this movie more than most people do. I saw it before the hate descended upon it and perfectly enjoyed it. So I'm going to give it a B, and I feel like that might make me an anomaly, but I did not find all the faults in this movie that everyone else seemed to when it came out.
Yeah, B feels maybe right, because I did say C on Aquaman, and it's certainly better than Aquaman.
It is.
It's like I would give it a B minus, and so I'm okay with it being a B.
Okay,
because,
this actually makes me feel. I honestly thought you guys were going to scoff at me. For
I agree with you. I think we might have all
Pedro
been
Pascal to me was like.
But also I liked the whole, like, Pine, the way they brought Pine back. I thought that was a really smart way to do it.
But they reversed it from the first movie, like, and then she was teaching him about the world, versus him teaching.
And then people just got a little too. They kind of overthought it too much, and they were like, "Well, isn't it weird that he's in someone else's body?" And it's like, yeah. But it's just like. Stop thinking like that. Like, I
do think one of the biggest missed opportunities in the show in the movie is that it didn't fully embrace the 80s time period. Like, I feel like there could have been so much more about the 80s than there was. Like, I don't think the 80s really made up much of the soundtrack. There really weren't that many pop culture reference. Like, for literally putting the year in the title, the decade, the very distinct decade, played little to no part in what could have been really fun. Seeing them have some fun with that. I felt like that was a major fault.
I agree. They went to a mall and that was it.
Yeah. Hey, it was the opening. We got
area.
the suits were 80s for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
BBB and Sean?
I can go B on this one, because I do remember enjoying it the very first time that I watched it. I tried to go back and rewatch it a couple of times. I don't think it holds up nearly as well. It drags.
I think it's a B minus. Yeah.
It drags in a lot of spots.
I think I didn't like Cheetah or whatever.
Cheetah is not a good translation to the big screen.
Too CGE.
But I really did like Pedro Pascal.
I didn't like the casting of Cheetah.
Yeah,
I found her distracting. Yeah. I love Kristen Wiig, but because of that, I found her distracting, I think.
Yeah. For the second go round of a Wonder Woman film, I thought they could have been stronger. I thought it could have been a stronger follow up to the first movie. But I think B is okay where it is.
All right.
Yeah. Cool.
We find ourselves in another sticky situation. We have Zack Snyder's Justice League.
A.
I'm gonna say S.
I kind of want to put it in S.
Just because what he was able to pull off.
It's a meal of a movie, which is maybe its only detraction, but
just, I mean, it's just, to me, it's an incredible accomplishment in superheroes and what we wanted out of a Justice League film.
And whether
had it in my top 10.
whether you like his
Sean,
approach or not,
Sean, is that?
Oh, yes,
Are
what?
you just is trash? Are you just looking through trash?
sorry.
Or-
he's
Sorry,
organizing his recycling.
I'm surprised you have any of those left over that haven't already been sold. Wasn't that a bestseller?
He's the one who bought them all, actually. For me, it's the sort of thing of one, if you're a film buff, if you're a film making nerd, film history nerd, and I don't mean that in a pretentious way. I just mean that if you find joy in like the fun little weird little stories that like will pop up in film history, this is a film history story that will live on forever that we got to live through. And I find that awesome. Not that that affects the grading here, but I think as part of that, I think whether you like his approach or not, or like the film or not, you have to appreciate the freedom that he had to make this.
Yeah.
And the toxicity of some of the people that, and then I guess, the news of like whether some of that was bots, and that's all, go read Sean's book that has a lot of that just detailed. I don't have to go through that. That aside, the fact that however he was given that freedom, the fact that he was given the freedom, and we got to see, like, when you're in like minute 12 in a row of slow motion action, you're like, holy shit, they let Zack Snyder just make this movie. And it's great. Like, and it's you feel that it's sort of a pure vision. And I love that about it.
Yeah.
I will say this about it. It is the most DC movie that we've seen yet.
Sure.
It has so many elements of what DC fans are looking for in a very coherent, and cohesive 4-hour package.
Yeah.
It has Darkseid. It has Steppenwolf. It has the mother boxes. It has a flashback to one of the first wars on our planet where Ares and an early Green Lantern, are fending off the forces of Darkseid. You get to the point where the League finally unites together with Superman in his black suit. It has Martian Manhunter. It has, the tease of the Justice League going back together, shot in his driveway. Yes, it is. It gives you everything you could have possibly wanted from a Justice League movie. And so for that reason, I think it belongs in the S category.
We got 3 S's and an A.
I'm totally fine with that. I mean, I love that film. I just think Man of Steel is on a different level. That's just my different. That's my story. That's just my.
I would agree with you.
But isn't our rule like not to compare them in that degree?
Well, and for the franchises, we're not doing the singular S tier, so
yeah,
we can do 2 S's.
I mean,
in the same way that there's A plus and A minus. I think there's a range in S there.
I also love the 4x3. That film had a lot of things that I really. I mean, I thought it was awesome. I mean, it was great.
And there's a black and white version too, which is amazing.
Look at that.
The black and white's great.
The Suicide Squad. Quite a departure from the original. We got an A, a B.
That's a B for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a B for me as well.
I like that film. I don't love that movie, but there was enough in it that I liked that I thought it was fun. It was
And you know what's funny?
And it peaks in the first 20 minutes.
That for some reason we'll get to Peacemaker because we are going to include Peacemaker in this. But to me, like, watching Peacemaker goes, oh, I like this a lot more than Suicide Squad because for some reason in this format, this character, this style of character, and the James Gunn humor worked better in that episodic format versus.
And he was the best part of the movie too. I thought
he's a great part of the movie. Yeah. He's a great part of the movie. So we have. I
like King Shark. I like Polka Dot Man.
Yeah.
I think Margot's having a good time.
Always.
The opening, we look past the opening. Now that we know what it is, how it plays out.
That is great.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
It's really funny the way that he just blows off half the team.
And they were all like a part of the promotion. They had everybody show up and we're like, holy shit, this is the biggest movie ever. And it was like, they were on set for a week.
Off.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is pretty
the starfish, the giant starfish at the end is pretty amazing. Starro.
And now you're kind of wanting me to put it in A. The starfish was great.
To me, that's where it did kind of lose me with the giant star. Like,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it's a B, solid B.
I'm in the B plus, and now as we're talking more about it, I feel like on a rewatch, I could be in the A territory. So I'm gonna stick with the B because that's where my gut's at the moment. But I did really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And we got Idris Elba in full like action star mode, which
terrific.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ratcatcher 2 is an amazing new character. I love her.
Ratcatcher's getting their own thing, right?
I think so.
They're coming back.
There's a joke in The Office that I always thought was hilarious because Idris Elba is in The Office for a really fun stretch, which is fantastic if you haven't seen it. And when he walks in, they describe him as, I think Dwight describes him as a very Will Smith type, which I think is funny because he kind of ended up basically playing like Will Smith's part in Suicide Squad, which I thought was very funny.
And for me, were there any final thoughts? Sorry, I thought I cut somebody off there.
No, I think we're good.
B's okay.
B's okay. B plus. And you're starting to convince me that there's a lot of good to that.
There's a lot of James Gunn in it. His voice is all over that movie.
Great.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's the CEO of DC Films you're talking about. You watch your damn mouth.
That's true.
I think this is another S for me, the Batman.
A.
I'm at a B for that one.
Oh wow, I didn't know. I love the Batman.
I would say A.
Wow, I thought I was gonna have someone in my S camp. All right, I need to hear why.
I'm very high A, but I don't know if I can. But you know, it's so funny because I was actually just thinking about this movie earlier today. And thinking about how like it's still really, I mean, we saw it in March, and it really has still stuck with me to the point where I legit had to pause today and go, is it my top 10 list this year? Like that's so to your point, like I almost in the same way that you just described Suicide Squad, I feel very confident putting in an A, but I have a feeling if I sat down and watched it tonight, I would come back tomorrow and be like, guys, that's an S. Because I haven't forgot, you know, and there's so many of these, you know, I said like with Aquaman, I saw it, never thought about it again. I do think about the Batman quite a bit. I'm going to regretfully put it in an A, and just because I feel like a rewatch would get it to an S.
I think the fact that he's able to, in his approach, sort of come so closely with the like, what if Batman were realistic, that Nolan did, and that Zack kind of did in his own sort of comic book flary kind of way, but create an entirely new feeling Gotham that feels familiar. It feels like Gotham. It feels like a thing we've lived in. Feels like, you know, when you go to Six Flags and you're on those rides, like it feels like a real world Gotham that's familiar to us. The fact that the emo Batman works so damn well, and he comes at it from that second year. Andy Serkis, I think, is fantastic.
I love Colin Farrell.
Farrell is amazing.
I love Totoro. I think Totoro is great.
For me, I honestly can't think of.
All right, I think I could go S.
I can't think of anything that would take it down for me. Like I maybe it's been
the
long
only thing
enough
that keeps
that
it. Here's the one thing that holds
Sure.
me up is that there are obvious places where, and again, this isn't the fault of the movie, but COVID affected the production, and so you could tell that there are places where, like, there are multiple rooftop meetings between Batman and Catwoman in order to like advance the plot. And I think just because they had to keep returning to that scene to move the plot forward, when I'm sure that Matt Reeves would have done it differently. And so from some instances, the film starts to feel a little bit smaller in scale. Whereas, you know, early on, especially like the scene where the car comes barreling through the memorial sequence, and when Batman's going through the ice lounge, like these are packed houses. This is action to the hilt. And then I feel like it gets a little bit smaller, but then it does sort of recover with the flood, and, you know, the way he rescues all the people from the
that to me, the arc of him being vengeance and then sort of realizing
hope.
Realizing the danger in that, realizing the damage in that, and then becoming hope, I thought was also just a beautiful arc for that movie.
You know what would have made it a definite S for me? If that deleted Joker scene had been included in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? That is a great scene. That is a great
terrific scene.
But I agree. We talked about this when that came out. I agree with cutting it because it is similar. It would be like, because I'm, now that you mention it, I do agree that like the rooftop scenes become a little repetitive. Like we get there a little too often, and the exciting nature.
I also thought Jeffrey Wright was in a different movie.
Oh yes, I agree with
Jeffrey
that.
Wright
I like
in that
Jeffrey
movie.
Wright.
I love Jeffrey Wright, but I just didn't need to be explained over and over again what was on the Joker's cards, and like they kept like going, all right, we can already see it, and then they have to read it, and like I thought Jeffrey Wright's performance was almost like he was like in some like 60s or 50s detective story that was completely different in genre or tone than the other characters were. And I think Jeffrey Wright's one of the most talented actors working today. But I felt like he was in a different movie than the rest of the cast. That's why
Kevin told me that. Kevin told me that, and then I rewatched it, and I was like, "Oh damn, you're right." Like he's got this kind of accent thing going on, and I
haven't rewatched it with that in mind. I'll have to.
It's making it an A for me. It's making it.
So I have an S,
solid
a B,
A,
and 2 A's.
Solid A.
Solid A.
Yeah.
You're an A too, right, Jake?
Yeah, I'm an
also
solid A.
the whole last shot of them splitting off on the bikes, that took forever too. I think Pattinson's really great in the role. And again, I'll give my reasoning for a B is primarily because of the rooftop scenes and then the over explanation of Joker's bits, and like Jeffrey Wright just seemed like he was in a different film. And then also, for me, I needed a little more Bruce Wayne. It's a lot of Batman, and it's called the Batman. I get it. But I think
it's not called the Bruce Wayne, Kevin.
No, I get it. Listen, I'm being persnickety here because I really enjoyed this film. I just don't. Word. It is a great word. I just don't. There were things that held back. Like I remember, like that whole entire sequence with Penguin and Batman is unbelievable. Like the race sequence with the
the car chase is incredible.
Amazing sequence. And there's a lot of great scenes in the film. And I think Dano's great in the role. And I think I just thought there was some really interesting storytelling choices that I thought just didn't play off. And I thought Penguin was kind of a little diluted for as much as that performance is great. I don't really.
Zoe Kravitz is great though. I love Zoe Kravitz in it.
She is great in the movie.
Zoe Kravitz is
really good. Yeah.
Yeah. The Penguin comment. I think that might be because he's coming back, right? And he's gonna be like he wasn't quite Penguin yet.
Yeah, I feel like it's an origin story for a lot of characters.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's Batman is the only one in that universe who is like who we think he. I mean, even it's still early for Batman. It's like year 2. So I still think like it's also an origin story for Selena Kyle and for Oswald Cobblepot. Sure. I mean, like
she's not even arguably yet, is she? Really?
Yeah. Arguably, like the only person who could argue
being young and nimble and like you know kind of finding a place alongside Batman in a way. Yeah.
So I think the Batman is a movie that will be made better as we get more sequels and we see the story evolve and progress.
Let's pick up the pace with these next 2, because when we get to Black Adam, you can just check out our Black Adam reviews. But Peacemaker for me is an A. The series.
I think it's I think that's a great A, and it's not to knock it that we're not putting it in S territory. I think just in terms of like it being sort of this HBO Max series, like there's sort of the ceiling that I can't like justify. Letting it is. It is a phenomenal A.
And Kevin mentioned that we might have talked over him. Kevin mentioned he's bowing out because he hasn't seen this yet, but I know he's going to catch up on it because it is.
Kev, you gotta watch it.
Yeah, I know. So much stuff. Yeah.
But knowing you. Move that to the top of your list.
Okay.
It's so good.
Really up your alley.
It's a great A. It's a great A. I will bow out of Black Adam because I have to confess I still haven't gone and seen it.
You still haven't seen it?
No, I just can't. Every time I think about it, I'm like, what if I watch something else?
Black Adam is a D.
That's my review of Black Adam.
D.
D?
I think it's a C. I think it's a
You're a
C.
D.
I think it's like a C minus.
Jake, are you like? I forget where you feel about this.
I think it's a C. In that almost to me, it falls in that category of almost exactly how I felt about Aquaman, which is like whenever I walked out going like that was fun. Yeah. Like I like that. That was good. And then like never thought about it ever again.
I will say Black Adam has some really cool fight sequences, but the story is awful. I mean, it's just a really bad script. And I'm not, one of the things that you get in trouble for sometimes when you talk about superhero movies, like, oh, well, the script doesn't have to be like the greatest thing ever. It's just a really bad story. And I just didn't, I don't know. I didn't find it. I found it to be, there were so many characters that I wasn't aware of, that I just didn't really learn anything about, or they weren't memorable. I do think Aldous Hodge was great in the film. I thought Pierce Brosnan did a really good job.
And
in
again,
his role.
as I mentioned, I don't want to dive too far into Black Adam. We just reviewed it, so go check out our Black Adam episode for our full reviews. But that's our DC tier list.
For now,
pretty good.
We'll be back with Shazam, Fury of the
good.
Gods.
Pretty good.
This
looks better than our MCU tier list.
Yeah, I would agree. Like this made me significantly less angry than the DC one did.
Yeah, or the MCU one. Yeah.
People are lobbying
MCU,
that
MCU.
we should be able to make some changes to the MCU. Like everybody should get like a blanket three changes.
Yeah,
Sounds like a lot. I don't know. We'll take that under consideration.
I think, and to me, I always love the idea of a review being like a stamp in time.
Yeah.
It just sort of means like doesn't mean that you have to stand by. I hate whenever people come to me and they're like, "Oh, you said this thing about this movie 10 years ago, but now you say this thing." And it's like, well, I was
a different person.
Believe it or not, I'm 34 now. Believe it or not, I thought differently of things when I was 24. Like things change. People change.
It's the same reason why and again, this is a strange example. When I saw No Country for Old Men, I gave it a 4.5, and because I didn't love the way the ending hit. But when I watched it 10 years later, I was like, this is one of the greatest. This is a 5 out of 5. That ending is perfect. But I wasn't mature enough or hadn't lived enough of a life to understand the concept of that ending. Things change all the time, and like I hate the idea.
The prime example is even for the filmmaker Spielberg and Close Encounters.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is our DC list. We're going to take another break. And on the other side, we're going to review She Said, and we're going to pick our favorite Carey Mulligan performances before we close out the show. Stacked show. So we'll be right back.
And we are back. So this week in movies, we have a couple of films that are coming to streaming that we wanted to put on people's radars. One is Disenchanted, which is Amy Adams returning to the role of Giselle from her Enchanted movie. I know this is a sequel they've been working on for a long time, and now she's getting an opportunity to come back and play that part. I assume that this would be a great film for people to play over the Thanksgiving holiday if you have family in town and the kids are looking for something to do. In addition, Netflix has Slumberland, which is directed by Francis Lawrence, who is responsible for most of the Hunger Games films and is going to be returning for the Ballad of Serpents and Rainbows. I forget what that's.
I'll find it. It's like something in snakes.
Yeah, something like that.
He also did Red Sparrow with Jennifer Lawrence, which was actually pretty solid.
And Constantine.
Yes. Constantine is awesome.
And I Am Legend.
And don't show Red Sparrow to the kids at Thanksgiving. That is not a kid movie.
Well, it depends on your kids.
Sparrow.
But Slumberland very much
disturbing.
is. Slumberland is very much for the kids. It's about a girl who lives in a lighthouse with her father, played by Kyle Chandler. He disappears, as most fathers do early on in these stories. And then she gets revisited by her uncle, who's played by Jason Momoa. And Momoa is doing this Willy Wonka type offbeat character who can travel in and out of dreams. And they go off on these wild, fantastical adventures that are very CGI heavy, but also really sweet and very charming and filled with a ton of imagination. And if you have young kids, they are going to love it. I had a blast with Momoa in this. It's a side of Momoa you don't get to see, on screen essentially, because he always has to play the rugged warrior. And I just thought he was a total blast in this. So Slumberland is coming to Netflix. In addition, reaching theaters, there's a highly anticipated and buzzy title called The Menu that played at Toronto, and the three of us have been meaning to get to it, and it's just been so crazy busy that we haven't had a chance to watch it fully, and so we can't give proper reviews of it. But The Menu's coming. I've heard amazing things about it. People at Cinema Blend got a chance to check it out up in Toronto, did a video review for it if you want to check it out. Loved it, said it's extremely funny, but has a real blend of humor and horror.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Blend.
It has a real blend. It's just, thank you.
That happened the other day when I interviewed David Harbour. He said something about stranger things have happened. And I was like, and he was like, son of a bitch. You did it. You did it. I was like DiCaprio in the meme pointing at the TV.
And Menu is Mark Mylod directed,
Yes.
Ray Fiennes, Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicholas Hoult.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Who are you looking for?
Those are the main three.
No, there's
I'm
another
missing
one.
somebody.
There's one other big one.
Oh, let me look. I'm on the
menu?
page.
Leguizamo. John Leguizamo is the name I'm
okay.
trying to come up with.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
He also has a
didn't realize he was
significant
in
part in it. But the big film that's going wide and has been getting a lot of push through advertising and hearing more and more about it because of the importance of the subject matter is She Said, which is a journalism film about the reporters at is it the New York Times?
New York Times.
Mm-hmm. The New York Times, who investigated Harvey Weinstein and eventually brought that case to light. I did not get a chance to see it. The boys took it. Jake, why don't you start us off and let us know whether this movie is worth putting on the radar?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. I think it is a absolutely phenomenal film. I have a weak spot for films about journalism. You know, I loved Spotlight. I love All the President's Men. I love The Post. And this one, I think, joins sort of those ranks. It really does show really how much effort went into. I mean, we just crossed the 5-year mark of that. That New York Times article coming out and really being a watershed moment, not just for Hollywood, but for workplaces around the world in terms of things coming out into the light of these have been accepted as norms, but they shouldn't be because they're not okay. And how much change has been made, specifically within Hollywood. And then when you think about the changes that were made, you ask yourself, well, why wasn't that the case to begin with? Why wasn't that, why didn't they have, intimacy coordinators on set when dealing with two actors who have to pretend to have sex? But and it's so funny. I normally don't love when Kevin says like, oh, this film is like a horror film or this film is like an action film. But I'm going to do that thing that I hate when people do, because there are this film gets so tense that there are moments where they're trying to make deadline or trying to nail the story by finding sources or getting sources to go on the record, because they found a million sources of people who were willing to talk about Harvey Weinstein, but none of them were willing to go on the record and talk about it. And that's really what they needed to present, as they refer to it, the whole story. And then Harvey Weinstein is sort of this looming character over the film, and that he kind of pops in via phone calls here and there and doesn't really show up in person to the end of the film, but it's just this almost like this horror movie like villain that kind of lingers over sort of the background of this entire story, where it's in that sense, then at some point it almost plays like a horror film in some ways. I think it's just there was so much of this story that I did not know. It gave me such an appreciation for what these journalists did to be able to tell the stories of these survivors, and also the bravery of the survivors who had everything going against them. Because one of the things I really loved about this film is that when it comes to the survivors of Harvey Weinstein's abuse and sexual assault and rape, oftentimes I think we get too focused on some of the bigger, more recognizable names like that. Those are the ones that tend to make headlines. Ashley Judd being one of the first big ones that came out. But there were countless women who were assistants, who worked in publicity, who were script supervisor, whatever the case may be, whose names weren't recognizable, who didn't have the power of Hollywood behind them, and were treated in such a way by Miramax to ensure their silence or have their lives be ruined. And what I love about this film is that they get a voice now. Like it's there, like, yes, like Ashley Judd was involved, Rose McGowan was involved, Gwyneth Paltrow was involved, and not to dismiss their own experiences because they are just as important. But there are a lot of people now who get to step up and make sure there's a woman who, while dealing with this, was also dealing with breast cancer. And they're just unfathomable things that no one should ever have to deal with. And it's represented in such a way, whether it be their stories or the two journalists who fought with an incredible team of journalists at the New York Times to make sure that this story was not abandoned, that it was pushed through, despite the fact that Harvey Weinstein was bringing the power of Miramax and the power of Hollywood down upon them. I mean, now it seems like of course that story was be told, but at that time, no, I mean, other people had tried and failed, and it seemed like a really scary thing to do. And I think that in 2 hours, this film really perfectly represents the struggles to make it happen and the importance of it happening. And hopefully that these past 5 years are just the beginning of a a reset in terms of what we will and will not allow to happen, not just in Hollywood or the workplace, but just the world in general.
Can I ask a question about it? Because I didn't get a chance to see it, but a lot of times with movies like this, when they address important topics, especially that are focused on the film industry, some of it can be preaching to the choir. Like the message is being received by people who probably already feel this way about Harvey. Like, is that an element of the film?
I mean, I feel like that's unfortunately the element of a lot of films like this, in that the people who are likely to see them are people who are invested in it. There are so many films about a wide range of topics who, unfortunately, the people who most need to see them are the people who are least likely to buy a ticket. So sure, you could argue that's the case for this film. That's the case for a lot of films. But it shouldn't stop movies like this from being made.
Mm-hmm. Kev, you were devastated by it. I remember you texting us after the screening.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it because I think I texted you guys this, like, for a film that I already know the ending, you already know the article gets published.
It's a good point.
But for me to sit in a theater and wonder if they're actually going to make it and it's going to publish, like, it's so well written and so well performed that you actually become immersed in the world and forget. Like, obviously, in the back of your mind, you know the article came out, but the beauty of suspension of disbelief and storytelling is when it can make you question that, because you're so in it. And I think Nicholas Bertel did the score for this. The score is incredible. Zoe Kazan and Carey Mulligan are the two leads, and I one of the things I love about the film is it's really kind of also a love letter to motherhood, in a way where the beauty of what you see in this film is both of these characters are mothers, and the home life and kind of what they were dealing with, and the juggling act and doing this story, but also trying to raise their kids and traveling. And then, there's this question that Patricia Clarkson's character asks in the film. She works for the New York Times. I think she's one of their bosses, her and Andre Brower, right? They're like the heads of the New York Times. I'm not sure their exact positions. But she says this question along the lines of, why is sexual harassment so pervasive and so hard to address? And when you hear that question asked, you go, yeah, why is it so hard to talk about or to address? And the movie answers that question, but in a way where, like Jake was saying, it points out the work that went into it. There's this entire sequence in the film, or even a huge part of the film, where Zoe Kazan is traveling all over the world just to hopefully find a source that will talk to her, who won't answer their phones, and somehow get that person to go on record and or help the piece. And I kept thinking to myself, when she was flying all over the place, I'm like, these people aren't going to talk to her. And can you imagine, like, all that time away from your kids and family, and then the work that went into it, and you start to understand, like, how hard this was to pull off. Also, like I said, with the idea of the ending, you are on the edge of your seat until that article is published. And there are performances in this film. Jennifer Ely, I thought, was outstanding. And also the way they Jake brings up a good point about Weinstein and the monster aspect of it, because there's a really interesting way, because it's an actor obviously playing Weinstein, but the way the character is filmed is fascinating. Yeah. It's like, just from behind, it looks just like him. It's this, like, gross aspect to the, like, it's so, like, well designed, and how they were able to shoot it. And then whoever does the voice of Weinstein, like, it sounds just like him. I actually wondered if I bet you the actor who physically plays it, if it's the same person, different from the
probably
voice.
I'd imagine probably not.
Different, yeah. But Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan. Also, one of the things that I loved about the film was there was these, like, lighter moments that I thought were really kind of, like, charming. Like, there's this moment that actually happened in real life, and it's such a small moment, but to me it was monumental to the film, where they meet up one day to go do something, and they're wearing the same outfit. And, like, it's like this, like, simple little, like, joke that they make, like, oh, I'm wearing the same outfit, should I go change? And I remember, like, I just mentioned that at the end of my interview to Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan. I was like, by the way, I know this is a very serious film, but I just loved that moment. And she's like, that actually happened in real life. Like, that's a real moment. So when you see the film, it's a small moment, but it was, like, to me, those were these like you're dealing with these journalists who are about to unleash a major. Didn't they win a Pulitzer Prize for this article, Jake? Do I have that?
I'm not sure.
So please, if somebody could let me know. I know it was some type of award-winning piece. I could be wrong. Forgive me if it's the wrong case. But you're dealing with a film that's dealing with very heavy subject matter, but at the same time, like there's such a human story happening behind. Remember, when you read an article like that. When that article drops, you're not really thinking about the people who put it together. You're reading it from a perspective of like, oh, sure. Wow, this is insane. Also, and so to me, they really humanize the characters. And I apologize if I have the award thing wrong. I remember it had some type of award given to it, I believe. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, the last thing I'll mention is this, Ashley Judd. So this is a really interesting thing. She plays herself in the movie. And for Ashley Judd to come back and essentially go through the story again and have to relive the truth of it. There's a warrior aspect to that is I thought was just incredible. And like, especially considering how hard that is to deal with emotionally outside of putting it back on film and then playing yourself to do it again. And so I thought it was incredibly well made. I was very, very involved in it. I could not look away from Carey and Zoe. I thought they were outstanding together. And I think one of the questions now that people are wondering is how they're going to stack the Oscars. And I think Jake and I were talking about this yesterday. I think Zoe, I guess, technically would be the lead because she kind of is the head of the story. But then Carey is such a big part of it as well. Gabe, do you have did I have it wrong?
It's the Pulitzer Prize for public service. Yes.
Oh, so beautiful. It was a Pulitzer Prize. Okay. All right. So like that article. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. So now I haven't gone back and read it after watching the movie. I kind of want to now just because I'm curious now that I have a focus of like what, of the two women who wrote the article and like kind of like now I kind of want to read it again knowing what they had to do, they were on a deadline because there was like a New Yorker piece that was being written similarly at this time by Ronan Farrow, right, Jake? I think there was right. And that they were trying to compete with that getting out first and like breaking it. It's a powerful story and a very, very, very important story. And I think even if you're not even involved in Hollywood or Weinstein, it, like Jake said, it speaks to workplace in general. Like it is just an overall perspective of how people work in a workplace and how they're treated. And it's there's a horror aspect to it for sure.
It's funny to me that we are journalists by all definition, but the idea of investigative journalism, like I could never go door to door knocking on houses, trying to get people to talk, to build a story. Like, right.
But also imagine flying all over the world, having
not knowing if they're even going to be there when you're Sean, imagine like we won't even like get on a plane for a junket unless we have certain actors guaranteed. And these people were getting on planes to go around the world in the off chance that they might be able to knock on a door and the person they need answers. Like that.
If they're not there, then you have to awkwardly talk to their family about something that they might not even know about.
Because then the family's going, well, why is a New York Times journalist knocking at my door?
It's pretty wild. Like it's really I was like,
it really puts into perspective
that whole sequence of Zoe traveling all over the world. I was like, whoa. I was like, that to me was the weight of it. And the motherhood, I think the motherhood thing is a really important piece to this film that just shows you like what they were juggling. It's amazing. Yeah.
I'm excited to check it out.
Very good.
Let's shift from Zoe that Kevin mentioned to her co-star Carey Mulligan. So the weekend in the blend game play hashtag Carey Mulligan blend. And I kind of feel like a bunch of us are going to have the same answer. So I'll start with Kevin, and then we'll see if we all agree.
Yeah, I mean, Promising Young Woman, I think I had to go with just primarily, Jake did too. I don't know. Sean must have a different one.
Sean, no?
I have a different one.
All right, then Jake and I will hash it out, and then we'll jump over to you.
Okay.
Promising Young Woman is actually kind of a perfect title to pick, considering what we were just discussing in terms of She Said and kind of like, and that performing, first of all, Emerald Fennell, Real Blend guest, by the way. Didn't we have her on?
Terrific interview. She was great.
Yeah.
Yes.
That film, first of all, talk about horror movies. That had some wicked sequences that I still can't get over that ending.
Yeah.
And I think, When I first saw Carey Mulligan, I think the first performance of hers that really rang true in my mind was in Education. I remember seeing her in that film and just going, oh my God, who is that? Like, she's absolutely outstanding in this. But Promising Young Woman was really the moment where I said to myself, like, oh, she's one of the best working today. And I've always thought she was a really great actor, but that performance and her and Bo Burnham are so great in that film together. And there's just and the whole idea of her living at home and her parents not knowing. I mean, there's just so much layered in that film that is just fascinating to me. And I just think she's so sharp in her delivery and just the commanding presence she has when she walks into that party at the end, knowing what she's about to do.
It's crazy.
It's just her pulling up to the house.
The tension and the fear in that sequence is so crazy.
And the soundtrack, even the soundtrack itself. I mean, it's just, yeah, that's it's not even, it's her, but it's also just that movie in general. She's phenomenal. So,
Jakey?
Yeah, this was a really interesting one because she has been in so many incredible films and been amazing in those incredible films that I really do love. But one of the things that we often talk about when doing these blend lists is that it can't just be you were good in a movie I really love. It's got to be that like you were a substantial part of why that movie is so incredibly great. Like she was great in Drive, but I don't necessarily think of her whenever I think of Drive or think of her as one of the major factors as to why Drive is so great. She is great in it. Or Inside Llewyn Davis being another example. Whenever I think of Promising Young Woman, I think of one of those really fascinating examples of acting where she's almost giving two performances at the same time. Because the first time we watch it, that character knows a lot of things and is pulling a lot of strings and is moving a lot of puzzle pieces that we as an audience member do not yet know. So she has got to perform it in such a way for us the first time so that she's not sort of showing her hand or tipping her cap in any way that sort of ruins the final act. And then she has to also perform those same exact scenes in that same exact take in that same exact moment. So that when we go back and watch it a second time, we can almost watch it and go, oh, damn, like I can see the wheels turning. I can see things there that I didn't see the first time. At one point, we're looking at it from the perspective of everyone outside of her. The second point, and the fact that she's able to give those two simultaneous performances, I was really bummed. I remember she came into that Oscar season really kind of hot and heavy, and a lot of people thinking that she was going to be a major contender for actually not just being nominated, but taking it home. I was really bummed that kind of fizzled out. I believe in the wake of the Frances McDormand Nomadland sort of hype.
Did Carey get nominated?
Yeah, she got nominated. And there were a lot of people who thought that she could have won. But I think it was just one of those peaked too soon, too fast. I think that movie came really hot out of some of the early awards film festivals. And, I will say that I voted for her for everything, for all of the award shows that we voted for. So I was really bummed that she didn't walk home with any hardware. I couldn't pick anything else. Not to say that she is phenomenal in a lot of great movies, but this movie is great because of her.
I did go Drive. I had to go Drive.
Yeah. Elevator scene, man.
For this reason. She has a really, really difficult part in that movie because she has to humanize him. And she has to be the reason why we want him to eventually get out of the life that he's in. And you see that happen a number of different times. Baby Driver jumps to mind as well, too. Like Lily James has to be the reason that wants to sort of pull Ansel Elgort out of that part. But what I love about it is that it's a detour to me for Carey Mulligan, because looking over her filmography, she tends to pick films that have really important messages, and she backs projects that come with a deeper meaning, whether it be Shame or Suffragette or Never Let Me Go, and Mudbound.
Never Let Me Go is brutal.
Yes.
And so they're movies that sit with you and really, make you think and go the extra mile sort of thing. Whereas I thought that this one was her really just plugging into a genre film, like Drive is a genre film, straight up. And it's probably the most accessible of Nicholas Winding Refn's films.
Yeah.
And I think that Gosling is, for all intents and purposes, the shark in Jaws kind of thing. And he's supposed to be just cruising through the night and accomplishing the things that he's accomplishing. And they're both surrounded by terrific supporting characters like Bryan Cranston and Albert Brooks are great.
Oscar Isaac
is fantastic when he comes on board. But if you don't root for their relationship, then the movie doesn't matter. The movie doesn't count. You have to buy into their relationship. And I love the fact of how she plays off of the fact of recognizing how dangerous he is, like the elevator scene, but still convincing us that she would go with him, that she would be, willing to sort of ride or die with him. And I think she gives an incredible performance. And so, yes, Promising Young Woman, it would definitely be something I would choose. I wanted to go with Shame as well, too, but that's a Fassbender movie.
No, you bring up a good point about her being it's funny because Drive's one of my favorite movies ever. And you're right, though. There's a certain anchor that she gives that character that makes you care.
Yeah.
Like even like in the beginning, before he meets her, there is this coldness. I mean, the character's always cold, but there's a light that comes on in his heart when he meets her and the kid, and even and a lot of that film is so internal, very minimal dialogue, and I think it's not as showy as from a performance perspective. I mean, Albert Brooks obviously probably gets the most like showiness of the movie in terms of like just how loud the character is, but in terms of her, like, I do think you're 100% right. It's like she is the reason why he has purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's actually, you're right. It's like almost like it's a part that's really important that it's almost a little undervalued or under.
That's how I feel about my friendship with Sean. Like I am the Carey Mulligan to his Drive.
Absolutely.
We call you Carey Mulligan in our other text thread without you.
Drive. I do. I mean, it's funny. I love Drive more than Promising Young Woman, just as a film. But damn, that's a great movie.
Well,
it's a good choice.
They're both good choices.
They're both great.
They show up in our audience picks because, Thomas Hugh says her character in Doctor Who's Don't Blink episode. I'm sorry, Doctor Who's Don't Blink episode, which I don't watch Doctor Who, so I will take your word for it. Christian Hestus went with Shame. Johnny says Inside Llewyn Davis, which again, terrific film. And her part in that is really significant because her rejection of him sends him on his sojourn.
It's almost the opposite of Drive in a way.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And she's so cold to him.
Yeah. And
she hands him the letter that says I'm pregnant, and then and he looks at her and like her eyes in that moment is fantastic.
I will mention, just a lot of people mention that Don't Blink episode, and I haven't watched it since I originally watched it like a decade ago, so forgive me if I'm forgetting something. But that is a very famous Doctor Who episode because it's these like killer angel statues, but they're like these stone statues, but if no one's looking at them, they can move. And so that's why it's called Don't Blink, because when you blink, they get closer and closer.
I have to tell you guys something that might anger a lot of people listening. I have never seen an episode of Doctor Who.
No, a lot of people
neither have I.
Yeah,
not one. Not one.
It's a cult it's a cult film in the US. It's a major film in the UK.
Yeah.
But it's like a cult following thing. Yeah.
I'm going to watch it right after I do every episode of The Big Bang Theory. That's first.
Oh, God.
And then Doctor Who right after that. So
you joke, but
yeah,
half of the people on this podcast love Big Bang Theory, good sir.
I do.
Yes, they do.
Big Bang Theory.
That puts it firmly in a C, I think.
No, sir, it's an S, baby. That's an S.
All right, Indy Christina, Jeff Cabrera, and many others went with Promising Young Woman. Okay, so for next week,
we do a tier list for shows called Big Bang Theory.
Next week, we're gonna have fun playing hashtag Michelle Williams blend. Michelle Williams blend. Good luck with that one, friends. Yeah, you think the Carey Mulligan's been involved in some big pictures. Michelle Williams got some doozies, so you can use it on hashtag Michelle Williams blend on social media. Or
I still think about that Manchester scene with her and Casey Affleck. Oh my God,
Jesus Christ!
Remember that scene?
when he tries to kill himself. I will never forget how. I don't think I've ever had my heart drop.
Yeah,
in a movie. It was like I was on a roller coaster, like in a weird way. Like it was like I was like, oh my God! Like it just is such a disturbing scene.
I want to remind people though that she was also in Venom. So please give it
shit.
proper consideration.
And also Venom 2.
Electric Boogaloo. Yes.
Yes.
Or you can email us at realblind@cinemablind.com. Okay, so our next premium episode is going to drop on Monday morning. We don't yet know what it's going to be, but we will figure it out by then. In the meantime, you can follow us on social media at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovach, and the show is at Real Blend. We'll be back next week with maybe some exciting guests. We got a couple of big things that are cooking.
Yeah.
Hashtag if they happen. And until then.
Hashtag hockey pads and also glass onions amazing. Just want to say that real quick at the end here.
It really is. It's terrific.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Go see it.
I'm sorry. I save my reviews for when we're supposed to actually give them on the show.